to the SaaS Developer community, where we learn how to build SaaS together. And with me today, I have longtime community member, Buchi Reddy. If you have been on our Slack channel, you must have seen him giving tips, advice, responding, very active member. What you may not have known, because he's a private person, is that he is the founder and CEO of Levo, which is a SaaS company specializing in API security, which is something that all SaaS developers care, or at least should care about. So it's definitely SaaS for SaaS, and participating in the community as a developer and as someone who builds for developers, which is extra cool. And we're here to chat about API security. Buchi, great having you here.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Ben, for having me here. I'm really pleased to be here. Excited to see, and hopefully, what we discuss will be useful for the audience.
Exactly. Yeah, so let's start with the basics. What is even API security?
Yeah, good one. I think, I'll keep it very simple initially. All the cloud native applications are built on APIs. API security in simple terms means like you want to make sure your APIs are not being used or not serving data or the data to any unauthorized parties. As simple as that. Like you don't want any ill-intended or unauthorized parties to access your APIs. That's put very simply, but if you want to get very technical, fundamentally, API, the cloud native applications built on APIs, and you are exposing these APIs to internet because you build web apps on it, mobile apps on it, partner integrations, all of this, and there's hackers and ill-intended people. They're trying to see if there are any vulnerabilities in your APIs, and you see if they can steal some data or make some transactions to transfer some money, or just at least spoil your reputation at the least, right? So API security is about how can we help developers and security people to actually make sure all the apps and APIs that you are building and putting out on the internet are secure, and you're not prone to these vulnerabilities, and you don't lose your reputation.
Makes perfect sense. So it's mostly about access, authentication, and authorization scope, or is it also around things like, I don't know, getting a DDoS, all kinds of payloads that can cause my application to crash, maybe even by someone who is authorized to send payloads?
Yes, I think you're already thinking in the right direction. It's about everything. Authentication and authorization are a big part of it, and developers more than everybody else are very intimately familiar because they are the ones who are implementing it as part of the business logic itself. But the API security covers much more than authentication and authorization. You talk about it, the injection attacks, and even the DDoS, basic DDoS kind of attacks. So you have to think exhaustively on what are all the different ways anybody could attack you. You don't have the liberty of saying like, okay, I'll only protect in these three, because like hackers are trying to be more creative than us, and they are trying to get ahead of us and use all creative technologies, including AI, and leveraging all the cloud computing capabilities and all of that. So the any solution has to be broad enough. Having said that, obviously you can't be super broad and solve everything. Like there's a term called coverage in the industry for this. So obviously not every tool will be covering everything from day one, but ultimately any tool that protects or helps API security has to think very broadly and increase the coverage drastically.
So as you're kind of building this tool and working with developers on adopting it and getting more value from it, do you care what developers already use for their APIs? Because I know from close experience, I have so many options around authentication. There is thousands and thousands and thousands of different ways and vendors and protocols that I could use. There's a lot of different ways I could do authorization. There is like different cloud providers and Cloudflare doing stuff. Do I need something in order to start working with you? Like, do you expect anything, or is it just, whatever you did, you can still get evaluated, essentially. Like there's no wrong starting point.
Yeah, great question. Maybe I'll give a brief intro about Levo first, so that
Oh, yeah, that's
answer.
a good point. Yes.
Yeah, so with the context, people can understand the answer much better. So, at Levo, what do we do? Like Levo is an API security product. We automatically discover all the APIs that you have, and whatever you have today in the brownfield environments also, and we build open API specifications for all of your APIs continuously. Like, I mean, it's almost magical. In less than 10 minutes, we can actually give open API specifications for all of your APIs. And I know I'm being recorded, so you can try out our product. So, and then we also surface all the sensitive data that is being passed through to your APIs, and kind of help you to understand which APIs are the riskiest and where should you put your attention and all. And then the next chapter is basically we help generate test cases. We automatically generate test cases. We have an engine, we call it as security testing engine, but that automatically generates tests to test your APIs in the CI/CD stages. I know that's a lot, but basically, I can get into why we had to build all these things and all. But with that in the context, so automatically discover your APIs, continuously document them, continuously surface the sensitive data, and then automatically test your APIs for all the categories. Like I said earlier, it's not just authentication and authorization. We test for injection and all these things, the classical attacks as well. So now coming to your question, okay, I think the first part kind of answers your question. We actually don't care about the technology or framework you are using to build your APIs. That's because actually we made that as a requirement for our solution, frankly, because when we were doing the customer development and talking to customers, obviously we start with, okay, do you have APIs? If not, I don't even want to talk to them, right, for this business idea. And Yeah. So you have APIs, and then how do you build it? We understand the technologies and frameworks, and very quickly you realize that, like, oh my god, there is like dozens of ways to build APIs. So we made it as a requirement that, okay, if we are building this solution, there is a way to build in a framework aware and technology aware way also. But we chose to be completely framework and technology independent, so that actually we can serve to a lot of customers. So the short answer is, we don't care how did you implement your API, and for that matter, we don't even care if you have followed the restful practices 100%, because we know, as a matter of fact, a lot of people don't follow, like especially the legacy applications or brownfield environments. So we just rely on the HTTP traffic, and we use a technology called ebpf that actually sits, like, it is not sitting in your application. We use Linux kernel technology and scoop up the HTTP traffic and kind of reverse engineer and try to understand your APIs from there.
Fascinating, but isn't that kind of invasive? Because you said like you can explore all my APIs if I absolutely do nothing, but installing an ebpf is not, especially on, like, we are running in containers using, Fargate to deploy them. Like, those are not easy to put ebpf into.
Yeah, let's chat about it. You're right. I mean, that is actually the first impression or first instinct that we see from some of our customers. And So ebpf is actually, like, if you see, ebpf stands for Extended Berkeley Packet Filtering. If you're familiar with the packet capture technology that has been around for ages, that was originally built on bpf. ebpf is like the next generation or next incarnation of that, and it has been around for, like, several years. Even ebpf has been around, and there's a whole bunch of nice new products that have been built. Like, I think one of the most prominent ones is Cilium. Isovalent is a company that actually backs it, and you actually see Cilium itself is being used in a lot of cases. There's companies like Sysdig, and all these actually have been leveraging this. Even Lacework, they leverage this for proprietary products. And all the on the FANG companies like Netflix, Facebook, all these, they have found a lot of use cases for this, and they have been investing and using it for as well, like, not just the security use cases, like performance and debugging and observability, all these cases. I would say we are probably one of the first to actually capture API traffic and use it for the API security use cases. But we are building on the shoulders of the giants, and there has been a lot of work. But like, let's see how invasive, like, let's try to define that. And should you be scared about installing an ebpf sensor in your environment? So let's
Yeah, not
uh,
everything should be scared, as you said. It's like proven technology, but it's effort. It's not like, especially with cloud vendors, it's not always easy to install eBPF technology in my environment.
it's definitely not easy, but we make it easy for our customers. We do the heavy lifting. So we build it in such a way that actually, if you want, our documentation has instructions. It's just one helm install command that you have to do if you want to use our eBPF sensor. And we take care of all the underlying and the Linux kernel, underlying operating system, and some of these specifics. So I mean, if you get into technical details, there are definitely nitty-gritties, and what you said is absolutely true. It's not something that you can just get it install and get it working easily. So we do that heavy lifting. We want to we make it easy for our customers. So it's difficult for us, easy for our customers.
I want to clarify to listeners that even though it sounds like a paid advertisement at this point, it actually is not. And I was believing I'm asking the hard questions. Buchi did not set me up to start digging into EPF details. In fact, yeah, no, it's great to hear that you've been working with customers and created an easy experience for that. I see. So now that we kind of understand how we will get all our APIs monitored, and also how do you basically, it sounds like you basically also tie it into CI/CD. So every time I make a change, you make sure that I didn't break any of my own security rules. So you kind of get started. You'll probably find some stuff. How do I think about prioritizing fixing it? Like, how much should a small startup really invest in securing all the APIs, and how much can be saved for later?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. And there are actually multiple questions. Let's try to address them. And again, I would like to give a little bit of context in this about in general. So the security testing of applications or application security is a very broad industry, and there are products that actually just access your code and do static code analysis, and based on that, they give some results. There's a complete category called SaaS, static application security testing. It's been a proven industry; they've been around for a long time. And there's another category called SCA, source code composition analysis, that is for all the open source software that you are getting. But this and Sneak is a very big company and leader, very well known to a lot of people there. And there are a bunch of other companies as well. So that is a whole static area. And another area of security testing is dynamic security testing, or goes by the short term called DAST. DAST is basically treating your application like a black box, and people call it as almost a scanner, because you just point your URL to it, and it is trying to do the spidering and scanning, and it will try to find vulnerabilities. And in every tool has its own pros and cons. And The vulnerabilities, like for example, if you take SAST as an example, it is looking at your code, and based on some of the signatures versions that are being used, and if there are known CVEs for that particular version, it's saying, hey, you are susceptible for this vulnerability. The thing that especially developers that don't like, including myself, about SaaS tooling is it's great, it is pointing, it is very early on, and the advantage is oftentimes it is just about going and upgrading a newer version, especially if the newer version is already released, and if that does not have this known vulnerability. But oftentimes I don't even know whether my application is really vulnerable to this, like, just because you know so that is,
And on
I
the
think.
other hand, customers freak out when they see all those CVE warnings, which, if you're responsible, you will disclose them, but then
Yeah.
you have to really figure out the implications and communicate them. And a lot of times, it's nothing to worry about, but people will still worry.
Yeah, I mean, I can give an example. Like, say, there is an example library called Guava in Java world, that has a lot of utility functions and all of it. and you can sometimes get Guava library into your application just to use two methods from it. I mean, some like today is all about reusing the building blocks, right? And somebody already implemented and tested it for you. Why would I write that code? Even if it is as simple as getting a simple mathematical function or something, I would use Guava. But then I'm only using two methods out of it. But Guava is a huge library, might have thousands of classes or thousands of files, and might be tens of vulnerabilities. Like, who cares? It might not even be relevant. That, I think, is a problem. And likewise, so that is the static code vulnerabilities. And with the dast, also, again, there's like what we hear commonly. Like, I mean, I haven't used dast tool myself, but I've actually seen a lot of people, and I've interviewed a lot of people who used it. So, and a lot of oftentimes what they say is like, I mean, there is a lot of way too many false positives, and I need to spend a lot of effort configuring it and all. So in both of these worlds, the SaaS to DAST SCA, these worlds, now going back to your question, okay, how do I prioritize and address this? These tools, generally what we see from people is like there's like tens of, if not hundreds of vulnerabilities that are reported to you. So your question is very valid question, because like you are actually looking at a huge list of things, and obviously cannot address each and everything. And most common approach that I have seen is like, there's all these vulnerabilities are reported with the severity levels. There is critical, high, medium, and low, and sometimes informational as well. And what I've seen is like, you make a process that, okay, I don't want to allow any critical vulnerability. So the number drastically goes down, which I think is a fair approach. When, again, if you forget the shortcomings of the tool itself, when you have this list in front of you, that I think is a logical and reasonable approach. So that's what I have seen people doing often. But it is very, very hard. Like, actually, for some of those zero inbox kind of people, like people who cannot really sleep well if the inbox has a lot of emails, for those kind of people, even I am one of those people. I've, I was always like disappointed by using those tools, because I am curious. I'm clicking on those high vulnerability, medium vulnerability things. Like, I'm part of me is telling like, oh my god, like what if they categorize it as medium, but for my application it might be a very important vulnerability. Like, it's like I'm stuck up in this no man's land where I can't let it go fully. I can't fix everything.
And you're right that it's also like, if your time is short, just curiosity to investigate every one of those, it can actually take up meaningful time.
Yep. So, so from there, but answering your question fully in the context of Levo, extending on this SAST and DAST, these categories of tests, I think by now you've already seen me complaining, or at least pointing some of the downsides of these approaches. When we built this, we were very clear that, hey, the last thing we want to do is throw more alerts and cause alert fatigue, or like, become one other tool who is really hated by these users, or at least not really loved by these users, right? So we have been very, very conscious in designing the tool. And first of all, what Levo does is a complete runtime testing. We call it as, what is it, or you can call it as dynamic testing. Like, we don't call ourselves as a dast. I can get into the reasons why, but what we do is complete runtime testing or dynamic testing. What does it mean? We actually are testing against your application. So that, first of all, eliminates these class of issues that I was telling earlier, where you don't even know whether your application has this issue or not. A practical example, we actually helped one of our customers when, you might be aware, recently this log4j and spring4 shell issues, they have become such a big issue. And everywhere, like, the leaders were telling team, let's rally around and go ahead and like address all these issues. In medium to large companies where there are hundreds of repositories, hundreds of applications, it's a not a small feat. And if they don't even know, at the end, if they realize that, oh man, we were not even susceptible for this, like we were not even calling that code path, it would be like a huge waste of time, and a bummer for everybody. So what
Yeah.
we have done when we release this log4 shell, spring4 shell testing, first of all, like our tool, the way we have built it, the moment that spring4 shell vulnerability was announced, within half an hour we actually added that to our product. And in the next couple of hours we tested and released it. Now all of our customers had the power that with a click of a button, irrespective of how many APIs they have, they could actually test their APIs for spring4 shell vulnerability across their entire applications, like with a click of a button. I mean, that's how we build the product. That is the power we are giving to them, the scale, right? Irrespective of how many API endpoints they have. And two, we actually show that issue only if that really exists in it. Like every vulnerability that we report is actually already exploited by us, and we include the complete request and response details, and we even include steps to reproduce this. Exactly, you don't
Oh,
have to
that's
trust us. You just
fantastic. Yeah. Because I was just thinking, like, even if we don't look at automated tools, I was part of the Apache Kafka PMC. We get security reports from different companies who are running Apache Kafka, obviously. And a lot of times they say, here is a vulnerability that we found, but they don't really explain how it's exploitable.
yeah.
And what are and if it even if it is, what would be the steps to exploit it? And I've definitely seen issues that deeper digging, and I'm glad people insisted, kind of showed that hey, this thing is actually significant, can cause a significant problem. Initially, it got dismissed as there is no, yeah, it's interesting, but there is no path to exploit. So, showing exactly how someone malicious could use a vulnerability is super important, because as a developer, I can make sense of it. As a product manager, I can make sense. Is this a priority for my company? Yes or no?
Yep. Totally. I think being a developer myself, like even if the same applies to a functional bug, right? If somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, there is a functional bug," first you ask, "How did this happen? How did you notice this, or how did you observe this? Two, can I reproduce it?" Because
Yeah.
like if as a developer, if I get those two, like, and I can actually give the fix immediately, like because now I have everything that I need and all of that. So it's not only about one. Like first, I need to become sure about the issue actually, whether it exists or not, whether I care about it or not, and also to fix it. If I can reproduce it, like it's way easier to actually fix and even test. After fixing, I can go ahead and retest it. All of that, it is super easy. So we made this as a design choice from day one, that everything that we are reporting, actually there is a full trail of how exactly we exploited it, and steps to reproduce it. Like today we give a call command to reproduce it. Like, I mean, we plan to eventually build a postman collection, or there is a tool called Insomnia, or some of these things where you can just download all these things, and we can make it so easy that when you click all this, you're just the only things that you're running are all vulnerability exploitation.
Yeah, no, I just thought about, and this is definitely, don't do it, but where my head is going around monetization. We will create a Postman repository with all your vulnerabilities for free. If you pay us, we will also make it private.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely don't do it. This is evil, but I like
Great
the
idea.
idea that it's so much around the automated testing in general is important, and I do think that a lot of security testing has been kind of manual, in the sense, like, I know that, and we had this discussion in the SaaS community. We talked about, do you hire a pen testing firm? Do you put on a bounty?
Yep.
And it sounds like you are basically introducing some automation to an area that was previously very manual, essentially.
Yeah, and there is more nuances to it. Like one thing I want to clarify there is, let's take testing as an example. Like let's say unit testing in the Java world or Python world. There is JUnit, PyTest frameworks in Java and Python world. If you as a developer or QA person want to write some unit tests, you can go ahead and use those frameworks and write them. What we are doing at Levo is actually not an equivalent of JUnit, but actually it's a combination of the JUnit plus the unit test that your developer or QA is writing for security. And so we are not just giving a framework; we are actually giving a fully working test cases. This is very important, because, like, if we can give a framework, but then again somebody has to sit and write. Actually, it's important to take a step back and understand why we are doing it that way, and in general, actually, why is API security testing automation needed? Why is it manual and all those, right? I think the analogy that I give is, if you actually see the whole DevOps momentum, like if you go like say maybe 6 years or 10 years ago, developers were just writing the applications and throwing over the wall to operations, and operations was completely operating. These two were completely siloed. Like tons of companies have come, and some of them are big, tens, fifties, and hundreds of billions of dollars of companies now. The whole DevOps momentum came, but now fast forward to today. Um, First of all, developers are intimately familiar with how to run their applications. If not everybody, but there are a good number of developers in every team who are familiar with technologies like Kubernetes, Terraform, all these DevOps technologies. They know how to operate it and all. Like almost like the dev and ops completely is gone. DevOps are actually embedded in the team. And the business advantage that came out of that is pretty huge. I mean, I don't even need to convince anybody, because that was very natural, and that's why everybody has done, and everybody is reaping the benefits of that by keeping their teams very agile, releasing the software very often, um, keeping the SLAs very well, and all of these things, right? The same thing applies to security. uh, Unfortunate reality is security has always been, to large extent until now, has been an afterthought. One example I give is like, I built almost 12 years ago. I built my first REST API, but I've been building REST APIs for so long. For almost until 3-4 years ago, I didn't have any idea about securing those REST APIs. It's like it's very bad. Like, I mean, so if you have been having REST APIs for 10 plus years, now you are talking about introducing API security tooling. You can tell how it is lagging. So the same thing, I see the same analogy. Just like dev and ops separate silos with the DevOps momentum, how they kind of converged, and devs now start participating in operations. They have this knowledge. I think the security is also going to be that, because that is the only way to scale. The pace at which we are innovating with the cloud native architectures and all of these things. One of our customers said this, like, APIs are growing like mushrooms in my company. So this, you would not be surprised if a company has,
This is so true.
yeah, I mean, it's like with the serverless,
But
with
that's a
the
good thing, and they don't want to stop it, right? That's the thing.
exactly, that's even more important. Like, they're growing and you don't want to stop it, but how do you do it in a safe way without really jeopardizing the security of your company, without putting your business at risk? The only way is just like the way we adopted even for deployment and operations, how we adopted code based solutions. DevOps as a code, or policy as a code, like infrastructure as a code, everything as a code. Like, you have to actually do security also as a code. So this is all the
This is
backstory
also
behind it.
what Nick is kind of pushing in their own domain and area, right? So it's kind of the movement is all, we can see it already taking shape and having a direction.
Yeah. I think this industry also is seeing it. This movement is called devsecops, and there's shift left. But fundamentally, what we are saying is, hey, because we have been innovating a lot, which is a good news, and you are releasing very very often, much faster than in the past. You have much higher security risk, and the old way of doing security is not going to work anymore. So that's where there is new process, new skill sets, new tools. All of these are needed, and new practices. Like, so the DevSecOps adoption, everybody is like, okay, now these days it's actually very common to see security engineers embedded in the teams. I mean, some of the modern, forward-leaning tech companies, if you see, the way they are doing already is, first of all, you can go and search for all these jobs. Like, there's a lot of jobs now posted for security engineers. So these are all actually, what is a security engineer? Like, I mean, I have seen some of my own friends, actually, the regular backend engineers, platform engineers, becoming security engineers. This is nothing but an engineer, but they are experts, or they first of all, they care about security. Otherwise, they would not develop that passion and skill set. And then they started educating themselves on a lot of these security best practices and all. Now they become a champion in the development team. Just like, if you have a dozen people development team, there's a couple of DevOps people and one security engineer on the team. And not only that, everybody is also slowly getting better with respect to security understanding. I'm not saying everybody needs to become the best security expert, but they'll start slowly getting better. But there is a champion who is actually there to help them whenever they need help.
Yeah, the
So
dynamic in which those specific roles and silos happen is kind of fascinating, because if you think about it, there is no reason that a security engineer, even on a team, will be like a role, right? Like
Yeah,
just like everyone, even if you're not a DBA, you write code against the database. There is no one engineer who knows how to write code for a database. You are expected to be fairly handy at tuning it when needed, etc. It's kind of weird that security, and I think there's few others areas that are just considered so big and convoluted in their own right, like front end engineering, and I guess security engineering is in that space as well.
exactly. Very good observation. Basically, there's some of these roles, they were completely siloed and different. But if you think about it, you can argue that they are not even needed. Like, I mean, first of all, why are you even developing APIs if you don't know about security? You can make that argument, but right?
I
Like,
don't know, I'm feeling called out.
no, I mean, I told you already, like I've developed the APIs for a very long time without having full deeper understanding of the security. I'm just telling you the reality of the industry, it is for legit reasons, because if you actually turn around the argument, if you actually start asking every engineer, every developer to become expert in these dozen topics, like, okay, now you need to be decently good at DBA, decently good at operations, just deployment and CI, CD, all these, they themselves are oceans. If you say every developer, hey developer, you need to be good at these dozen things, I don't think they will ever write code and get shit done. So the point is, I think there is a good balance you have to strike, and actually, if you see at small companies, you see that already happening. Because in my company, we are like 16 people company. I don't have a DBA on the team. I don't have all these specialized roles. So in startups, it was already happening. But as a company grows, you want to have people who are like focused on delivering business logic, so that actually you can innovate features faster. But that is where in these big companies, like, because of the org structures and some of these things, the silos got created, and now suddenly this unit. So what happened is basically the developers innovation, how quickly we're innovating, all of that got a lot of attention from business leaders and all of that. So okay, they got the budgets and they got the right attention, and now they are doing good, they are releasing more. But then the security also needs to catch up. So
And
that's
that's
where I
where
think
the
at some
embedded
point,
model actually makes sense, because the business leaders who move fast also get the budget to hire the security experts into
yeah,
their teams. Yeah,
yeah.
that makes
So
a lot of sense.
our vision and the way we build product and all of these things is actually for this, for all of this forward leaning, with all of this in the context. So we are a big believers in devsecops. I mean, I think shortly answering your question, right? The why we built like this, essentially we are automating all of this, we are doing all of this heavy lifting, because we know and we understand that not every developer can become a deep security expert overnight. At the same time, we have to give a solution that helps them not to compromise on the security of their APIs and applications.
Yeah.
So that's what made us think, and we said, okay, hey, we have to completely auto generate this, enable every developer, they can use our tooling. And by the way, we do a lot of educational aspects also in our tooling. We every test case that we generate, if you go, we have a visual representation of what is this test case doing, why do you care about it, and all of this in a terminology that any developer or anybody who is familiar with the API can easily understand with a lot of context. We do the educational aspect also, we do the test case generation, all of it. But our ultimate goal is, like, make developers participate in this without, again, asking them to become a deep security expert overnight, which is not going to happen.
So I can see how as a startup, I don't have security specialists. I need to move fast. I can totally see why this kind of automated approach will absolutely take things to the next level. But I'm wondering, like, at some point, as we mature and grow, obviously, next thing on our roadmap is a SOC 2 audit, and then maybe at some point after that, hire a pen tester or try for a bug bounty program. Are At what point are those needed versus just the automated approach?
Yeah, I think that SOC 2, the SOC 2 GDPR, or that ISO 2000, and the whole compliance world. I think we have spoken to 100 plus customers. Based on my knowledge and looking at industry, that is driven primarily from your own customers.
Yeah.
When you need it, there is no one right answer. And but what I can tell is all this automated testing, automated API discovery or catalog, all of these things are going to help you get those compliances very, very easily,
Yeah.
because these
Well,
compliances are going to ask you questions.
it makes them easier. Very easily is a different story.
Yeah. Yeah, easier. Okay. Uh, very specific words. I agree. It definitely makes it a bit easier, because like these compliances are generally asking questions like, "Hey, tell me about all of your assets." They call it as assets, or all your APIs, where they are, what kind of data you are dealing with, what data you are storing, what data you are serving, all those things. That helps. But those compliances, when do you get? It depends on your business and when your customers are asking. I think for companies like us, for example, we are a security company, and some of our customers, like we are seed stage, and we have just been around for 1.5 years. Some of our customers already ask us that, hey, do you have SOC 2? Like we do business only with the companies who have SOC 2.
Yeah, but pen tester and bug bounties are optional, right? So at some point I need to decide that I need them.
Even there, the data that I have seen is mixed. If some customers explicitly ask, I want to see a third party pen testing report also.
Makes sense,
Uh,
yeah.
Ultimately, see, you want
And then
to.
they will not accept the level reports. They need they need someone specific.
Very good point. That's our vision. Basically, I want to get to a state, maybe in a year or two, or whenever is the right time after winning a lot of customers' hearts. I want to get to a state where people actually showcase on their website proudly a certification given by Levo, that our APIs or our applications are actually certified by Levo, and hopefully that
And the
makes
GitHub
everybody.
badge, that's an important bit, right? We all need the GitHub badges.
Exactly. I mean, that's a kind of confidence that we want to bring to our customers and their customers.
Yeah. So switching things a bit, but since you've probably seen a lot of teams who do not have a security expert using Levo to add security, you probably have a great view of all the mistakes that developers can make when they don't know much about security and they're trying to do APIs. Can you give us some pointers so we can all run and check our code base that we didn't make all those?
Yeah, I think so. There are some that are definitely some mistakes that people used to do, but they are getting better and better. Like, for example, if you are using any database, like I think today, I haven't seen any application in 2022, somebody not using an ORM. But hey, developer, if you are still not using an ORM, you better be sure that, like, your database code is not subjected to all of this injection and some of these attacks. That is just one example where, like, I think people have gotten better over time. But if you say 5 years ago, the SQL injection was like a pandemic. That's because people were like rolling up their own code, or not using ORMs, or not handling these cases.
And
But
then there was the XKCD comic, and now everyone knows what happens if you do not sanitize your tables. There's going to be little Bobby tables deleting your entire database.
yeah, exactly. So that's one class, but otherwise, the same applies to authentication, and now next to authorization code as well. Authentication and authorization codes are not super easy to get, and I know you guys at Nile are also actually solving something in that area. It needs a lot of expertise, deep understanding, and it takes a lot of time for you to actually get a solid authentication solution working. If you just hack around something and try to put it there, like, people will find holes in your authentication and authorization systems. That is definitely a common thing that we are seeing. Like, when obviously I can't name people or companies, but we did surface some lack of authentication on some few endpoints for some customers. They were like, holy crap, like, my entire team was under the impression that these are authenticated endpoints, but like, and it is very surprising, but it happens because the implementation might not have been fully tested, or is not foolproof, or they're not using some common practices. So I think authentication and authorization is the area. Actually, there is a body called OWASP. You might be familiar. OWASP. So very well known in the security term, but they come up with the top 10 attacks that have been going on, right? Like, I think it's very helpful for everybody to be familiar. So they released top 10 for APIs, and authentication and authorization are like up at the top. And those are the same mistakes that I actually see. Those are the kind of issues that we find for our customers also, which is the exact reason we put a lot of emphasis on testing for authentication and authorization of our customers' APIs. In our product, they take a huge center stage. Authorization, we test for like horizontal authorization issues, vertical authorization issues, like even almost object level permissions, like ACL control kind of authorization issues. So these are the top ones that I see. But yeah, I mean, my suggestion is ORMs, authentication, authorization. Look for either dedicate enough time and build it solidly, test it thoroughly before rolling it out, or try to use some off the shelf very well proven out solutions. These are not some things that you can just hack around in a week and put it there. You're calling for a lot of risk if you do that.
Something interesting around authentication, and I'm curious about your take on it. Obviously, if you start looking at the world of automated authentication, which is really what you need in the API world and all those integration, it's extremely common to use some kind of a handshake, and the end result of that would be a JWT token that is then used to prove identity and even prove ability to access certain things. And you keep using it for a while, and then you have to refresh them. I was and I like this is fairly familiar. There's a lot of standards around it. I was very surprised to discover that there are security experts who very loudly and persistently proclaim that JWT is not secure. That you should just not use it, even though this is literally what everyone is using, and that there are better alternatives to JWT. Is that something you encountered in your conversations? Do you have a take on, is the world going to move past JWT, or is it actually good enough for everything people are doing today?
So my observation, I haven't come across an generic argument that don't use JWT token. I think
Okay. I'm going
there
to share stuff in the SaaS channel with everyone then.
so JWT, just JWT does not mean you are using JWT does not mean you are using it the right. The arguments that I've seen people actually clarifying is, for example, you can have JWT, but if you are not verifying the signatures, or if you are not using the right algorithms, you are not getting the full advantage of JWTs. So there are definitely people who actually caution you against, hey, it's not just enough to say I'm using JWT, but use it the right way. Validate the signatures, the backend systems that are actually implemented to enforce it, and all of this. Other common argument that I see some common, very well known people and reputed people said is they hate these JWT tokens which are not expired forever. The JWT tokens are actually used. One of the biggest advantage that developers get is the stateless nature of the JWT tokens, but the same thing actually makes it difficult to expire them and some of these things. And implementing such system, it is doable. It's not impossible, but it's a little bit more involved and difficult. So what I've seen is actually developers get to the level that they might do all these checks and all these things, but they will still have tokens that are not expired at all. And that definitely is a common argument that I have seen. I think I mean, logically they are right. It's always better to have some kind of expiry on every token, even if it is a little longer, depending on your use case. So, and business and API that you are building, because obviously too often expiring tokens sometimes have other disadvantages. Like if you are giving an API key to a customer or an integration, and every morning you're asking them to copy a new token and put it, like they would hate your product. So there are sometimes legit reasons, but I think I in general definitely would recommend, like, if it is something a long term token, at least have something like 90 days, or
Yeah.
or maybe 1 or 2 months, whatever makes sense for your business.
And it's also really also a matter of how the API token is going to be used. Because if it's used just, as you said, like inspect it and provide access based on just the inspection, then yeah, you're absolutely going to need expiration. If it's used as an access to another thing, so you authenticated with Twitter, you got an access key, and now you use it to access Twitter, the token itself doesn't need to expire because you only use it to access Twitter. Twitter can always stop accepting this token, which is exactly what they do with the tokens they give out.
100%. I have actually seen the longer living tokens mainly used for these kind of use cases actually.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. So we've been talking for a while now, and I often finish with questions that is a bit more kind of future looking. How do you have kind of a prediction around the future of security industry? You shared a bit already about DevSecOps, but I'm curious if you kind of like want to summarize your vision of an amazing world.
Yeah, I think full automation and full code basically, and I think that's easy to say, but very hard to be done. But that is an amazing vision. So if you actually, we can make it even more specific for services. Wearing a backend developer hat, if I am developing some APIs, just there are some ways in which you can actually auto generate API stubs and some of these things. If you can notice, it would be great if in fact I have this as one of the ideas for Levo. At some point we might explore, but it would be great actually if you give this as part of the template itself. Like, say I can write an open API specification, I can go generate code, server side stub in different languages and all these things. And by the way, can you also generate whole bunch of security tests along with this in the same code generation tool that I'm
Ooh.
enforcing? I'm running directly in the IDE as I develop the API. I'm running in the CI, like everything is kind of automated, and I'm like watching out from day one. I think
Yeah,
that eventually we want to get there. Like that's definitely an idea. I don't know if I
yeah.
spilled my idea to the world in this, but uh, full automation, full code based security is the way to go. I actually, anything else won't scale. I think people already recognize that. And you have to do it at different levels. Like security is very broad, and often they use the term defense in depth, right? So you have to apply again the same thing, this automation and full code at different layers of the stack. So I think my discussion has been predominantly about APIs and apps, but there is like security at the infrastructure level, container level, network level, endpoint level. Like there is at all levels. And already, like, there has been a lot of innovations going on in other worlds also. Like if you see container security, there great innovations happened, like infrastructure as a code, and as part of that there have been some companies and tools which are actually doing the security scanning also completely automatically from very early stages. So I write a Docker file and I actually can scan it the first time I build the Docker image itself.
Oh, can you give shout out to someone who is doing it so we can?
I think Docker itself is actually supporting it with
Oh,
the support of Sneak. I think whenever you build a Docker image now, you see that message. I think they have partnered with Sneak, but there are a bunch of other open source tools as well. Like there's one tool. Maybe I can post it in the community, but there's one excellent tool that I came across recently. I will double check if it is open source. I would be more than happy to post it. If it is closed source, like unless I'm using it, I don't want to endorse it. But
makes
it concept really seemed really well. So I'll post it in the SaaS community.
awesome. Sounds great. Been fantastic chatting with you, Buchi, and thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And this is very near and dear to my heart. I'm very passionate about some of the topics that we touched on, and really enjoyed the conversation. Great questions, and hopefully it's helpful to the audience.